All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For the one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish between spirits, another various kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of tongues. All these empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. Now, last week we talked about gifts of healings, which are a power gift. And you can turn me down just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm number 8. Just a little bit. And that's in the plural. So it's not like somebody has this gift for healing where they can go heal anybody that they want. We saw Paul use gifts of healings, but not everybody he knew was healed all the time. So he didn't have total command of this. He would flow in that gift. He would have faith. Maybe he flowed in faith and then would believe God for many gifts of healings. But a person that flows in the gift of healing doesn't mean that we can heal anybody anytime as we wish. We're still subject to the Holy Spirit. You follow me? And we see lots of examples in the Bible, and even with Jesus, how faith was a factor in healings. Okay, now sometimes there was the faith of the person receiving the healing. Sometimes it was the faith of their friend. Sometimes it was the faith of the person praying, even with Jesus. But here's the thing, we got to remember, faith isn't in faith. Faith is in Jesus. He is the object of our faith. Our faith when we're believing God for something like a healing is trusting Him, trusting His ability, trusting who He is, trusting that He wants to heal us. It's all towards Jesus. Now today I want to talk about the gifts of miracles. And it's the same thing here where it's in the plural, indicating like each miracle is a gift. And so the same thing, not one person can just perform any miracle anytime that they want. That's not what he's talking about here. Now the definition of a miracle is an event or action that apparently contradicts known scientific laws and is hence due to supernatural causes, especially as an act of God. Now, what's the difference between a miracle and a healing? Right? Because it's like, okay, well, what's the difference? Now, I was studying this and researching, and I saw some people would say that, well, healings are gradual and miracles are instant. And I was like, So it's funny how many times we study stuff, there's so many opinions. I'm like, just read the Bible. Because with Jesus, what did he do? He went out and healed them, and it was instant. There was like one time in the Bible where healing wasn't instant. It was when he was praying for a blind guy, and it took like a couple minutes. So it's still pretty radically fast. So I can't really say that that's the difference between a miracle and healing. Miracles do tend to be more dramatic. One argument could be made that miracles and healings are more for the person, because we do see this in the Bible, Matthew 14:14. When he went ashore, this is Jesus, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, and he healed the sick. So we see his motivation for the healing was he wanted to heal them because they were sick. Sometimes when God does things, he's just blessing us. You follow? He sees us sick, he sees us hurting, and he alleviates that. And so that's definitely one of the motivations. And sometimes he even told people not to say anything about the healing. In Mark 7:36, Jesus charged them to tell no one, but the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So Jesus did these healings, and he's like, listen, he wasn't doing every healing as a sign. He's like, shh, just be healed. Go show yourself to the priest. Don't, and sometimes then the crowds would come after him, and he'd like have to sneak away. And so it wasn't, sometimes he heals just because he wants to heal. Okay? Now miracles, oftentimes we do see that those tend to be more of like a sign type thing. But I won't say that like 100% every time God does a miracle, it's only for a sign. Sometimes God does miracles too to be a blessing to us. Amen? Amen. And one thing about miracles that is different from healings is a miracle doesn't have to be a healing. Now, in a way, Every time there's a healing, that's a miracle. If somebody says, wow, they got healed, that's a miracle. That is a correct statement. That's not wrong to, say, well, no, it's a healing, not a miracle. Sometimes theologians get way too, trying to a healing can be a miracle. But with miracles, sometimes it has nothing to do with the body, all right? Like, for example, we'll look at a few miracles here. One time Peter was out and someone came up to him and he says, does your master not pay the temple tax? And Peter's like, I don't know. So he goes to Jesus and Jesus is like, should the son of the king pay a tax? He's like, you know what? He's like, I know who I am. I really don't need to pay the temple tax. But Jesus is like, I don't want to offend him. So you know what? We'll pay the temple tax. But he doesn't reach into his pocket and give him the money. And Peter didn't have the money. He says to Peter, he says, go down to the water, cast a line in, catch a fish, pull the fish out, and there'll be a coin in his mouth, and pay with that. What's that? That's a miracle, right? Because if every time you pulled a fish out of the ocean, there was a $100 bill in there, I would be the best fisherman ever. Right now, I don't like to fish too much, but I would, maybe. Be finding gold in there every time. We'd all be all right. But that was a miracle of financial provision. I remember one time when we were in Bible school, and when we were in Bible school, I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and I was tired all the time. And sometimes with our school, we had to pay as we go. And so sometimes it was really tight. And we had a family, we had 2 kids, Danny and David were around. And so I remember one month it was really tight, and I wasn't, sure where the money was going to come from. And the way our school was set up for the families, they had like an apartment complex, but it was like a quad. All the apartments faced each other with walkways around. So your apartment is like right there, facing the front window and front doors, like a motel. And so it was nice out. You went ahead, the window open, and she was standing there in the kitchen. And this guy walks up, another student, and he goes, I don't remember what he said. He goes, here you go. And he reaches in through the window and he gives her a check. And he might have said, like, hey, God told me to do this or something like that. It was like very short. And he goes, here you go. It was for $1,000. And this was 20 years ago, so that's like, I don't know, a lot more even now, $2,000 or $3,000. How would you like me to give you $1,000 right now? All right, hands go up. That's the only time they raise their hands. It's like, yep. All right, well, you know what? God does financial miracles. And you know what? That day he did. And it was like, that was a miracle. That was like not something I could make happen. That was something beyond my ability. That was just God doing a miracle through somebody else. One time the apostles were arrested. Acts 5:18. They arrested the apostles and put them in the public prison. But during the night, an angel of the Lord appeared, opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, go and stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life. And when they heard this, they entered the temple at daybreak and began to teach. Now here's another one. Nobody was healed. This is a miracle of being set free from prison. And what did they do? He says, here, go and preach. He set them free so they could go and preach. I read this book. I don't know if anyone's ever read this, The Heavenly Man. It's about Brother Young from China. I encourage you, it's good to read books. It's good to read books. And there's some really good Christian books out there, and there's some really bad ones. I have a friend who only reads dead people.
What?
He only reads dead people books. That means the author is dead. Because if the book is still in print, it was probably worth printing. A lot of these books, they come out and a year later it's gone and you can't even find it because it was so lousy. But if the book's been around for 50 years, anyway, I digress. So this book isn't that old, but it's still in print. And anyway, this is about the story, the autobiography of a Chinese Christian who came to the Lord in China, and really his whole journey and all the trials and the stuff that he faced. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I encourage you, if you want to read it, a good autobiography, to check it out. But one of the stories, he was in prison for a few years in a maximum security prison in Beijing. And he's been in there for a couple of years. This is maximum security, okay? And the Holy Spirit said to him, just walk out. It's time to go. He's like, okay. So he goes up to the first gate, and it wasn't locked. And he walks through gate after gate after gate. And then he has a picture of the last gate. It's like this big iron door, and it was a little cracked open, and he just walked right out. He goes, it was like I was invisible. And this happened about 20 years ago. You know what? God still does miracles today. He is still setting us free from all kinds of prisons, both real and the ones we put ourselves in. You know what? He is the God of miracles. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen? He walked right out of that prison. One time when Paul was shipwrecked, and after they got out of the water, they built a fire. And remember what happens? He gets bit by a snake, right? Acts 28:4. When the native people saw the creature hanging on his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man is a murderer. Though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live. He, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune come to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. You know what? That was a miracle. He should have died from the snake bite. And now, what we start to see, which I'm going to get into here in a minute, is welcome. And what we start to see is that all of a sudden we see those miracles that happen is he starts to get influence. Now, you know, Paul, he wasn't the first time he said, oh, you're a god. Whenever that would happen, he would start preaching the gospel to them, right? And on that island, he ended up preaching to the whole island, and they were bringing sick people, and the ruler of the island family member got healed. And so, you know what? All of a sudden, he starts testifying of Jesus. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, remember, they were in the fiery furnace, and nothing happened. They didn't even smell like smoke. They weren't burned. And it wasn't just the apostles. It wasn't just the disciples that God did miracles through. There's two guys, Stephen and Philip. Stephen and Philip in Acts, you know what their job was? They were Kelly and Kat. Kelly and Kat, they were in charge of hospitality. So I'm expecting some miracles from you gals. And you know what? Their job was waiting tables. Literally is what it says. Peter and the other disciples were like, listen, we can't be distracted with doing everything. We need some people to be in charge of distributing the food. And so these guys were in charge of that. What does it say about them? Well, one time, Philip was witnessing to an Ethiopian eunuch, and then he led him to the Lord and baptized him, and the Lord carried him away supernaturally. Disappeared and took him to some other place. And then for Stephen, Acts 6:8 says, and Stephen, full of grace and power, was doing great wonders and signs among the people. He wasn't one of the apostles. He's like a regular Christian dude. How many regular Christian dudes and dudettes do we have in this place? You know what? God can, will, and does miracles in and for and through us. Amen? Miracles are often called signs and wonders. And here's the thing, God doesn't just do wonders just to be wonderful. Just to be, hey, look at this. It's not just a magic show. It's not just something just to look cool or just to be entertained. Signs and wonders, whenever they're mentioned in the Old Testament and New Testament, they're together. They don't say he did many wonders. No, it's always wonders and signs, or signs and wonders. They're put together because signs point to something. In the Greek, it's events that signify something. Acts 14:3 says, so they remained for a long time speaking boldly for the Lord, who bore witness to the word of his grace, granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands. See, the miracles that were happening were testifying to the message. They were testifying that the message was real. Acts 8:6 says, and the crowds with one accord paid attention to what was being said by Philip, and when they heard him, and they saw the signs that he did. See, now I heard something here. If life was easy all the time, we'd never have any miracles. If everything went our way, we would never have a miracle. If Peter wasn't broke, there'd be no reason to find a coin in a fish. God didn't stop the shipwreck. God didn't stop the snake biting Paul. No. Then he went in and did the miracle. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you realize they were taken from their homeland. They were made eunuchs. Yeah. And then God saved them from the fiery furnace. Now, me, I'd be like, God, how about just I die in the fiery furnace and not be a eunuch? That's my miracle. We don't get to always choose the miracles that we want. But you know, something crazy happened. And he didn't stop Paul and Silas. Remember when Paul and Silas were in the prison? He didn't stop them from getting a beating. He didn't stop them from being thrown into prison. But the results were pretty awesome. See, Peter knew after that, he's like, I can trust God's provision. The whole island of Malta, that Paul was stranded on, the whole island was affected by the message of the gospel. And it wasn't even on Paul's itinerary. It wasn't where he was planning to be. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, after they got out of the fiery furnace, you know why they were in there? They were in there because they didn't bow down to the idol of the king, right? And now when they got out, what did the king say? He says, you have a God that is like no other God. He said, I'm passing a law. If anybody speaks anything against your God. So now a whole people group that was forbidden to worship their God are now more than allowed. They're completely free to worship Jehovah Jireh. Isn't that amazing? Yes. For that miracle. See, they didn't get that miracle that maybe they wanted, but they got a miracle that was needed. The Philippian jailer, what about him? See, Paul wouldn't have met him in maybe normal circumstances. If Paul and Silas hadn't been thrown into prison and beaten. But you know what? The Philippian jailer and his whole family came to Jesus. Because that miracle happened at just the right time. See, sometimes we're human, right? Everyone here human? See, I got more hands for the fish, the money in the fish or $100 bill. Yeah, we're human, right? Okay, so we're human, and sometimes we focus on the miracle that didn't happen instead of the miracle that God is about to happen. Instead of the miracle that he's about to do. And I understand that's normal, but you know what? That's where the faith comes in. That's where our trust comes in. We're like, all right, I'm in the midst of this. And God didn't do it. Everybody in all those stories, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Paul, and Silas, everybody at that moment before the miracle could have been like, thanks a lot, you've helped me, no way, no how, you've done nothing for me, God, thanks. What good is this? They all could have felt that way. But man, if they would just hold on a little longer, and they did. If we would just hold on a little longer and trust Jesus a little bit more, because you know what? He's got something great. He's got a miracle coming. And here's what we trust. We trust that he's got a reason. Because all of those things, he was putting people in just the right places for a better miracle. They could have just saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They could have stayed in Israel. But they ended up, through their sacrifice that wasn't easy, having a tremendous miracle that really saved the whole nation. That's pretty great. Just got to trust in Jesus. Don't miss the miracle he's about to do. Look at those problems. Instead of his problems, look at them as pre-miracles. Sometimes it's like, why did this happen? And now I'm way over here. This is not, I was not planning to be shipwrecked. I was planning to do this. But he's got a great miracle right there, right where you got dropped off. And that's pretty great. The problem has put us in just the right place for a testimony. And we can trust Jesus, and he will do a miracle. And I think this is where the faith comes in. Unless God specifically tells us a certain way to believe, which sometimes he does, we trust that his miracle is going to be the one that's needed. That's the trust. See, like I might want it to go this way, and he might be like, oh, you know, that would be great, but I'm going to do it like this. And it's going to be better. It's going to affect others. It's going to encourage more. It's going to do more for the kingdom. It's going to be a bigger miracle. I'm like, but I wanted this one, Jesus. But this is better over here. And that's where we decide, you know what? I'm going to trust you, Jesus. That's where the faith comes in. We say, you know what? Okay. And then we stay there in faith. And we watch those miracles happen. Amen?
Amen.
Let's stand.